Okay, I'm doing this video real quick before we take off, but I just wanted to let you know that this is an unreleased podcast we filmed in Sweden. So check it out. Me and my dad were having a conversation. We were walking and talking in Stockholm. I hope you enjoy it. It's a bit of a funny one / a heavy one. It's on spiritual warfare. But I hope you enjoy it. Share with a friend. See you guys on Friday.
So we decided to come to Stockholm, do a battle ready on the road. We were supposed to come here in 2017.
Yeah.
And you had a fight with cancer, a battle with cancer, and that it seems like you've won, and which is a beautiful thing and a miracle.
Well, we were supposed to be here.
We were supposed to be here, 2017, and we had to cancel.
Yeah, and I hate canceling.
You hate canceling. You tried to go.
I did. I was trying to postpone my surgery so I could keep this commitment. But it's kind of amazing that we're here 3 years later.
Yeah. Getting to do a battle ready here just feels kind of right.
It does.
It feels kind of like the next installation of what we're gonna do. We've started a new TV show with the Hillsong channel,
McManus,
which is like battle ready with a budget. and we just started shooting the first few episodes, and we're actually shooting this a week before it launches, which is pretty cool.
It is exciting.
And they're like the producing team and all of the crew at Hillsong have been so like championing, and so I'm excited to get into that. But we still want to do this. We still want to do this battle ready. As raw as it is.
I think it's important just to talk about things that we're facing and dealing with, and just to have open conversations about life. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that is out there is so overproduced that it becomes almost too sanitized, and you never get to have the real raw, honest conversations.
Yeah, hold on, that's so cool. There's a skateboard in a suit just right there.
Well, this is raw and unfiltered.
Sorry. I'm back. No, so many of the conversations are so raw and unfiltered. Or so scripted. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Even our show. Like, there's moments where we're talking with, like, Steve, our producer, who's...
the best stuff is going to be left
awesome.
on editing.
And we're like, Steve, we need to film these conversations. This is the good stuff.
But they did. A lot of the trailers are all the outtakes and the moments that we're not supposed to be in camera. And that's what I do like about what's happening with the show, is that we're keeping a lot of the stuff that I think a lot of people would cut away.
Yeah.
And that's what makes life more interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Wow, look at the menorahs up there.
I think
it's supposed to be a Jewish community.
I do think, though, that like so much of the moments that we care about are the moments that we know people will never see, because I think those are the moments where we've learned so much about ourselves and so much about life and so much about our relationship with God and so much about other people that you when things are perfect, it isn't where you actually learn the most. Venice has been a church for almost 2.5 years now. Mm-hmm. If you like consider the beginning of Battle Ready in Venice, like the beginning of our
campus,
church, beginning of campus. It was a Wednesday night thing, and I think I've almost killed that campus like 3 or 4 different times. Whether we lost the venue, or we just lost a lot of, like this summer we lost 8 leaders just because they moved from LA.
Wow.
Joined master's programs, got different jobs, went back home, moved to help other campuses. I lost 8 of my like key leaders, people who were running things, and I have, that's a smaller campus, and then you have churches all over the world that lose key people all the time. And 2019 felt like it was a hard year for everyone.
I think there was a lot of people that just had a challenging year with 2019.
And I called you one week, and I remember talking to my co-lead, Carlos Pimentel, and one of my best friends in the world, and then I called you, and I just said, I think we're done in Venice. I think I've killed it. I was kind of preaching or maybe speaking a little bit, and you were like, why don't you just like back yourself and stick with it and don't give up and just do. You told me you're building a church bigger than the church that I built at 30, and I
also said, instead of giving up, why don't you try getting to work?
Yeah. Told me to just work harder.
Yeah.
And it felt impossible. It felt like I was working as hard as I could, doing everything I thought I could do, spending time with people, building events, reaching new people, trying to put on a cool gathering Thursday nights in Venice on the beach. And I just could not get my friends to keep showing up. I couldn't get people to stay consistent and to grow and to invite their friends. And I just said, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna preach every week, and if it dies, at least it died and I learned something. And and it didn't grow right away.
No.
It was like 6 weeks to maybe like 8 weeks later, we had hit 120 people, and we were so tired and exhausted. And there was no green room. There was, not that you need a green room, but there was no space to collect your thoughts. I'd have to go into the alley and hide behind a dumpster, like next to a dumpster, and then in next to an apartment building. I'd have to use that as my rest. It's good to know they have angry drivers in Sweden too. And one night, just 200 people showed up. And we grew by like 60 people overnight. And then the next week it was like 210.
In the last few weeks?
In the last few weeks, it was
over 300.
Over 300. No, in that room it was over 200, and we got to a place where it started growing.
Yeah.
And it felt like we were untouchable. and it was so funny because even though there was life change happening before, it just felt like there was so much going on when the people showed up, and maybe that's me being insecure. But every time you build something, you want people to go. You know what I mean?
But I look at it and go, I think a part of the environment you guys were creating was an environment of expectation. People show up when there's expectation, when they feel like there's life here, there's something happening, and if you don't believe that something's going to happen, the people coming aren't going to believe that.
Yeah.
If you don't believe there's a future, they're not going to believe there's a future.
And I think I was filling the environment with my insecurities.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes we have to be careful, because a huge part of leadership is shaping environment, and you cannot hide what's really inside of you. People will feel it.
No. And I was such a coward. And so afraid. And I think I took it so personally that let's walk on this side. And I think I took it so personally that people weren't showing up because it was my thing. And I realized that like I didn't have that much power over people.
And it's not your thing.
And it wasn't my thing. and
you're a part of this bigger thing, right?
Part of this bigger
beautiful thing.
And we talked about it with my team. I was like, this is more your thing than it is my thing. There's more of you than there is me. And if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it together. And if we're gonna fail together. And something switched, and we got to a point where it grew so much that we couldn't be in that venue anymore.
That's awesome.
Which was incredible because there was only one restroom. So right before I had to go to speak, I'd have to ask a friend to like wait in line in the bathroom line for me to then jump in the bathroom, or run out to the alley and like use the restroom. It was horrible and funny. And I remember the last week, it's our last week, and I told the team like, we're not finding a new venue until I can't see the concrete on the floor anymore.
That's right. That's good.
And there were chairs in front of me, behind me. The worship team was having to sit on stage, and it was the most epic feeling. And we were cramming all these people in this little space. And I was in the bathroom, about to go preach, last worship song, and I hear this huge thud. And it is loud. We're in a box, it's loud. I hear this huge thud over the worship, and a woman came in and tried to basically like come on stage, and one of the volunteers just like sweetly was like, oh, hey, just wait, we'll get you a seat right after this song's done, because it was a bit hectic and the rows were filled. And she just, instead of being okay with it, we didn't realize she was actually like a kind of crazy, and just hit him in the face. Just hit our leader in the face. And he's one of our, we call him the true pastor of Venice. He's one of my main guys. This guy named Marco's Brazilian. And so he gets like clocked in the head, and one of our security teams kind of like escorts her outside, and we're outside, and we're in this moment where we're completely surrounded by people off the beach. There's homeless people, there's transient people, just kind of the crazy hippies that live in Venice. And our security team and this woman are now fighting, and I remember just feeling how much spiritual warfare there was in this moment. And I think so oftentimes we forget that we are surrounded by a spiritual environment.
Yeah.
Surrounded by this environment that we cannot see, that there's good and evil, there's light and darkness, and so many people would say that there's the devil and then there's God, and I don't really think I don't think the devil is a qualified villain to be against God. I don't think there's anything as good or
It's not even.
it's not
fair.
even. It's
Yeah.
it's unfair, and that God is so much greater. But I do think we let those things in our lives, those spiritual atmospheres, dictate us.
Yeah.
And I remember, we had an intern, a summer intern, who's the son of one of our campus pastors, Joshua, and he stood in front of me as this guy came up to me and said, you guys are a church, and he was gonna fight me. And I'm about to go preach. We're in the last worship song, and I'm like, the cops are coming, there's 50 people outside, this has become like a mob situation. and I look at this intern, and he's like tearing up. He's scared, and I'm like, we're about to get jumped right before we go on stage. And you have taught me my whole life that there are things in this world that we cannot explain. Mm-hmm. And can you talk to us a little? I know I've talked for a long time, but can you talk to us a bit about spiritual environments, that this spiritual warfare, that this world that is unseen?
Well, I think one of the things that I just want to summarize is, as you led to this particular moment, is that what we do has this interesting intersection of intense seriousness and unrestrained fun. And if you're not having fun, people are going to want to come. But if you're not moving to serious engagement with life change and this dynamic of what would be spiritual warfare, I think there's a combination of things when you're dealing with spiritual warfare. I mean, you're also dealing with the basic issues of emotional instability in people, of mental health. You have people who are unbalanced, and then you have really the manifestation of evil. That if you're going to do the kind of work that we do, you're going to realize it's an engagement between light and darkness. And it in the book of Acts, it actually talks about how it's the conflict of two kingdoms, how the kingdom of God is actually advancing against the kingdom of darkness. If you're going to take this seriously and help people come to know Jesus, you're going to violate the darkness. Every time you set someone free, you've released someone from captivity, from a bondage. And if we're going to listen to the meta-narrative in the scripture, that humanity is captive to darkness, and that Jesus came to set us free to his light, then you need to realize that every person that you liberate to hope, every person you bring into the freedom of Jesus' love, is not released willingly. That you've just gone to war for that person. I think this is where people get confused. I think a lot of times people think we're at war against humanity, and we're not. We're at war for humanity. And what you experienced in that moment, it's not an accident that right before you had to speak in the last gathering
in our biggest
that location,
Wednesday we'd ever had.
standing room only, somebody comes in and punches a person, then spits on the person.
It spits on the security guard,
Yeah.
and then we get surrounded by 50 men who are now trying to defend the situation and attack us.
Because what you had was a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality.
Yeah.
That war was already taking place there. By the way, that war takes place every time you walk into that room, whether someone gets punched in the face or not.
Yeah.
That war is taking place inside of the hearts of people every moment. And I think that sometimes is underestimated and underplayed. And some days I feel like God almost just wakes you up. Like he pulls back the curtain and lets you see what's really going on.
Yeah.
And other days you only see it because you see a marriage healed, or you see a relationship restored, or you see someone who was depressed find hope, or someone who was suicidal find a reason to live. And we see it from that side. But there are other times it just seems like he just pulls back the curtain and says, I want you to see what's really going on here. There's something really profound, something powerful, and something deeply spiritual, and it is a war.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why our podcast is called Battle Ready.
Yeah, we talk about and I think we talk about so many ideological battles. And I think growing up, you used to tell me, you have this story about when I was a kid and I went to youth camp, and you joke that when you're a normal kid, they tell ghost stories.
Yeah.
When you go to a Christian camp, they tell demon stories. But I grew up with this awareness and this spiritual awareness of what was entering my soul really mattered. And I think so many young people, especially like in California, in major cities, that we open our souls and our hearts and our minds to things that are so far from God and so far from a healthy spiritual life. And I was listening to a podcast, I think it was like Chrissy Teigen and Dave Chang, this chef that I really like, and they were talking about how once you move to LA, you really get into crystals. And they were like totally just making fun of LA, but when you come to a new city, you come to LA, you take on that was scary, but it was just a dog, dog freaking out. You take on this spiritual manifestation. That it feels like when you move to a place that you actually take on the spiritual weight of it. Mm-hmm. And we talk about this when we go to LA. There is a lack of peace in the city. You can feel the heaviness of what young people are going through. You can feel that there's this expectation to be something that isn't normal in humanity, that isn't necessarily something that God wants for us.
Yeah, and I think one of the things people underestimate is that cities have environments. They actually have environments of anxiety or depression or greed or destructive patterns. And just like when you go into someone's house, when you go into someone's home and they're healthy and they love each other, you feel the weight of the beautiful environment.
You've been someone who you've been the person who has taught me to see what's unseen. Yeah. And when you walk into an environment, you feel the undercurrent. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've learned how to I'm in the process of learning how to surf, but the guy who I surf with has always taught me that it's less about what's happening at the top of the water, but what's actually going on underneath. Wow. But you can tell what's going on underneath by what's happening at the top. Yep. That when you get in the water, there's so much that can pull you and throw you and bring you under. Mm-hmm. But it's darker and heavier as the deeper you go. Yeah. And when you walk into a room, you know that there's so much going on and you feel it. And I think so many times humans like young people don't want to be aware of it. Mm-hmm. That they kind of live in the shallow end of going, I know that there's stuff going on at home, but I'm going to live in this space where I just ignore it completely.